Galen Prue lifted my name card off the veteran's table with 2 fingers. The way you lift something that has been set down by mistake. It was the Memorial Day banquet, in the fellowship hall of the First Methodist Church, between the invocation and the ham. One long table at the front wore blue bunting in 8-place settings, and behind it on easels stood photographs of men in uniform going back to Korea. The room smelled like candle wax and scalloped potatoes. 200 folding chairs, all of them full, and the sound in the hall was the good warm noise a small town makes when it believes it is doing something right. My card had been the 8th one. White stock. Black type. My name spelled correctly, which somehow made it worse. Galen came down the line straightening forks, and she reached my card. And she stopped, and she looked at it the way you look at a wrong number on an invoice. Then the 2 fingers. She slid it into the pocket of her clipboard, smoothed the tablecloth where it had been, and leaned toward me with the kindest face you have ever seen on a closing door. This table is for our veterans. I want you to know what I did, because it is the entire story in one motion. I did not stand up. I did not reach for the card. I picked up my sweet tea, and I held it, and 11 months of this town went through me in one swallow. What happened 90 seconds later is the reason you are hearing this story at all, and I am not going to tell you yet, because for 11 months nobody in that room saw it coming, and neither will you. To understand why I sat still, you have to start where I start, with a piece of paper under my windshield wiper, the first week I came home. My name is Vera Stanic. I am 53 years old, and I spent 22 years in the United States Marine Corps, motor transport, and I retired as a master gunnery sergeant, which is a rank most civilians have never heard spoken out loud. When people ask what I did, I have a 1-sentence answer that took me years to sand down. I drove things through places where the driving was the dangerous part. Fuel, water, ammunition, mail and Marines, in convoys, on roads that had opinions about us. 2 tours in Iraq doing exactly that. I will not be describing those roads tonight, except to say that I brought back a ribbon that only gets issued when the road shoots first, and that after a career like that. A town with 2 stoplights and 1 church potluck calendar looked to me like the softest duty station in the world. I was wrong about the soft. I was just wrong about it in a way no convoy ever prepared me for. I grew up here. That matters. So hold it. I left at 20 and came back at 51. When the high school posted an opening for an auto shop teacher, and my mother's knees got to where the stairs needed supervision. The town remembered me, in the way towns do, which is to say they remembered a version of me that stopped updating in 1992. The Stanic girl. The one always under a car in the driveway. Betty at the pharmacy called me honey the first week and asked if I had been away. 22 years, 4 continents, and a retirement ceremony with a color guard, and the word the town reached for was away. And here is my share of this story, laid down early, where I can keep an eye on it. I let them. I did not correct Betty. I did not correct anyone. The high school knew, because my service record crossed the principal's desk with my teaching certification, but a personnel file is not a conversation, and I never made it one. I told myself it was modesty. It was not modesty. Modesty is not minding whether people know. What I had was a policy, and policies have reasons, and mine was that I had spent 22 years being exactly visible enough to be responsible for everything, and I wanted 5 quiet years of being the nice lady with the truck. You cannot grade people on a test you never handed out. Remember I said that. I will have to say it again later, at a worse time. The note came the 1st November. A Tuesday, outside the Food King. I had parked in the space by the door with the blue sign, the one that says veteran parking, because I am one and because it was raining sideways. I bought coffee filters and motor oil and came back to a piece of lined paper folded under my wiper blade, going transparent in the rain. It said in blue ballpoint, in handwriting that had learned cursive from a nun, "Shame on you. This spot is for people who served." My husband was in the Navy. I stood in the rain and read it 3 times. Then I got in my truck and drove home and put the note in the top drawer of my toolbox, the shallow one, where a mechanic keeps the things she cannot fix. I want to be honest about why I kept it. Because it was not evidence and it was not a grudge. I kept it because it was the first document this town ever issued me, and a master gunnery sergeant files her paperwork. I never found out who wrote it. Whoever she is, she goes to that store, and she loves a Navy man, and she believed she was defending something. Hold that note. It does not get resolved. Some doors stay shut, and I have learned to keep the key in the drawer anyway. You need Galen now, and you need her fair, because it would be easy to hand you a small-town villain in a seasonal cardigan and let you hiss at her, and it would be a lie. Galen Prue is 58 years old, and she is the finest organizer this county has ever produced. 15 years running the memorial committee, the banquet, the parade, the flags on the square that go up at dawn and come down folded. She keeps binders. She keeps backup binders. When the county courthouse flooded in 2019, it was Galen who had every veteran's grave in 4 cemeteries already photographed and logged, because of course she did. Her husband Frank was Navy, a boiler technician, and he died in 2010, and she has run every Memorial Day since the way some widows keep a garden, daily, kneeling, with her whole back. This year mattered more than most, and I knew it from the church bulletin before I ever met her properly. The state had shortlisted us for a Heritage Town designation, a tourism grant worth $40,000, and the review committee was coming during festival season, and Galen had been preparing for it the way I used to prepare for inspections, which is to say, as if love could be graded. My name entered her system in January, when the school district lent me to the memorial committee for what the email called logistics support. And I want to show you what happened over the next 4 months, because no single day of it would hold up in court, and all of it together is the whole case. The committee emails went out to a list, and my name fell off the list twice, and both times the apology was prompt and warm. The sign-up sheet for the honor guard went around a table I was sitting at and passed me the way water passes a stone. In March, Galen touched my shoulder in the church basement, looked at my forearms with real appreciation, and said the hospitality table could use your muscle. Hon, there's tables and coolers, and honestly the men make a mess of it. In April, the parade committee assigned floats, and I found my name typed neatly under a float called Wives and Mothers of the Fallen, between a casserole chairwoman and a woman whose son flew helicopters. Nobody sneered. Nobody in this story ever once sneered. I was moved the way furniture is moved, by inches, with care, away from the part of the room where the town keeps its idea of a veteran, and the hands doing the moving believed, every single time, that they were tidying up. I could have stopped it with one sentence. I know that. You know that. I had a wallet card and a shadow box in a closet and 22 years of paperwork, and every single week handed me an opening, and every single week I took my policy out and looked at it and put it back. I have asked myself since whether it was pride or shyness or spite, and the honest answer is worse than any of those. It was fatigue. I had spent a career proving things to people whose opinion was above my pay grade, and I had promised myself that home would be the one place I never had to produce my credentials, and I confused that promise with peace. So the town filed me under helpful, and I let the file stand, and the drawer in my toolbox stayed shut, and that is how a person ends up watching her own name get lifted off a table with 2 fingers. Not in one insult. In 4 months of kindness with a category error at the bottom of it. Now Pearl. Because 8 months before that banquet, on an ordinary Thursday, the whole rest of this story walked past me at the pharmacy in a lavender cardigan, and I almost missed it too. She was ahead of me at the counter, small as a comma, white hair pinned up, arguing pleasantly with Betty about a prescription price, and on the collar of her cardigan, where another woman her age would wear a brooch shaped like a cat, there was a pin. Tarnished. Swept-back wings with a diamond-shaped center. I have stood in enough museums and enough hangars to know what I was looking at, and my heart did the thing it does when a convoy spots something that does not belong on the road, which is to slow everything down and look twice. Silver wings. WSP wings. Women Air Force Service pilots. 1943. There were around 1,000 of them. Ever, and they ferried bombers and towed gunnery targets so the men could ship out, and 38 of them died doing it. and the ones who lived got sent home without so much as a bus ticket. She finished with Betty and turned, and I did the only thing I have ever done well with strangers, which is ask a precise question. "Ma'am," I said. Avenger or B-26, and Pearl Odom, 99 years old, stopped in the middle of that pharmacy and looked up at me, and I watched something open in her face like a hangar door coming up 1 inch. Just enough light under it to tell you the whole airplane is in there. "B-26, she said. "The one they told the boys was unflyable. We flew it all day and twice on Sunday, towing targets. Live ammunition coming up behind us, and none of it aimed at me on purpose, which is more than the boys could say." She looked at me for a long second, taking in the boots, the posture, the haircut. "And what did you drive?" she said. "Because you have the look of somebody who drove something." "Trucks," I said. "Through Iraq. Twice." Pearl nodded slowly, the way you nod at a fair price. "Well," she said, "somebody had to bring the gas." I laughed out loud in the pharmacy, and Betty looked over at the two of us, the nice lady with the truck and the little widow from Cedar Street, standing by the reading glasses, two invisible women recognizing each other in broad daylight, and Betty saw absolutely nothing at all. The Thursday visit started because of her truck, a 1974 Ford she still owned and could no longer safely maintain, and they continued because of everything else. First Thursday of every month, my toolbox in her driveway, her lawn chair set up beside the fender like a supervisor. I did the brakes, the plugs, the timing. She paid me in flying. 60-year-old stories with the torque still in them. Check rides and crosswinds, and a colonel in Texas who said out loud that the program was a stunt, right up until the day the stunt out flew him. You will hear more of Pearl's ledger later, where it lands hardest. So I will give you only the one entry now, the one she handed me across the fender in October like a part she wanted cleaned. "They made us civilians. Vera," she said. "All that flying, and the paperwork said civilian. Congress didn't call me a veteran until 1977. I was 50 years old before my own country agreed about what I had been at 20. She wiped her hands, although her hands were clean. "So I know how you take your coffee, girl, and I know why you don't tell this town a thing. I waited 34 years for a piece of paper. You're just better at waiting than I was." That was the state of my world going into May. A drawer with a note in it. A committee that kept me near the coolers. A 99-year-old wingman the town had filed under widow. And a banquet coming, with a long table at the front, and blue bunting, and 8 white cards. The parade came 3 weeks before the banquet, and I need you to see the parade, because the banquet only finished what the parade started. Memorial Day parade in this town is 11 minutes long, and the whole county comes. Fire truck, high school band, the honor guard from the Veterans Hall, 2 convertibles of elected officials, and the floats. I had quietly taken my name off the wives and mothers float by volunteering for what the committee called staging, which meant I spent the morning where I am happiest, in a gravel lot behind the hardware store, lining up vehicles in march order with a clipboard and a whistle I never once blew. It is convoy work. I had the band bus, 2 flatbeds, a tractor, and 40 pounds of buntings dispatched to the route on time and correctly spaced. And if you think that happens by itself in a town this size, you have never met a float committee. I stood at the mouth of the lot and watched my order roll past the reviewing stand in front of the courthouse. And the announcer, a kind man who owns the feed store, read the script Galen had typed for him. And the script said, over the loudspeakers, to the entire county, "Let's hear it for our veterans, and for the lovely ladies who support them." I want to be exact about what that sentence did, because it did not hurt the way the note under the wiper hurt. The note had an author. The loudspeaker had a town. 200 people applauded on the courthouse lawn, children on shoulders, flags in fists. Every single one of them applauding a sentence with a sorting error in it. And the sorting error was me. And it was also a 99-year-old woman on a folding chair outside the pharmacy with a tarnished pin on her cardigan, watching a parade that had never once, in 80 years, thought to drive past her house. I found Pearl afterward. I did not plan to say anything about the announcement, and neither did she. She looked up at me from the folding chair, patted my forearm, and said, "Well, they got the flag spaced right this year, anyway." Which is how women like us complain. The banquet invitation came in the mail the first week of June. Cream cardstock. Galen's font. Dinner to honor the veterans of the county. First Methodist Fellowship Hall. And in the corner, in italics, a line that mattered more to me than it should have. Seating for our honored veterans at the head table. I read it at my kitchen counter and felt the two versions of the evening fork in front of me, plain as a road split. In one version I called the committee and said the sentence, the one I had been not saying for 2 years, and the head table gained a chair with no surprise in it. In the other version I said nothing, and I found out, in public, in a room with candles, exactly what this town believed I was. I am not proud of which version I chose, and I am not sorry either. A master gunnery sergeant will run a test she already knows the answer to, just to have it on paper. But here's the part I did choose, on purpose. And it is the reason everything after happened the way it happened. I called Pearl and offered to drive her. She had gotten the same invitation for 15 straight years. The committee mailed one to every name on the auxiliary list, and for 15 straight years she had thrown it away. And I will let her tell you why in her own voice. Because I wrote it down that night so I would not lose the wording. They sat me with the widows in 2009, she said on the phone. Frank Prue's memorial year. Nice women. We talked about green bean casserole for 2 hours, and the whole time my wings were in a drawer 11 blocks away. I decided a room like that could go on without me. I said, "Come anyway." I said, "I'll drive you in your own truck, and we'll park it where everyone can see the paint." And Pearl was quiet on the line for a moment, and then she said, in a voice with flight in it, "Pick me up at 5. I'm wearing the pin." So that is how the seating happened, and I wanted on the record that nobody arranged it and nobody could have. I walked into the fellowship hall at 5:40 with a 99-year-old woman on my arm, and the greeter, a sweet teenager from my 4th period class, looked at the two of us and did exactly what the town had trained her to do. She led us to the corner, to the round table by the coat rack, the one nearest the kitchen door, the table for the ladies of the auxiliary. Pearl navigated to her usual chair like a pilot to a familiar runway, and patted the seat beside her for me, and said, low, "Welcome to the widow's table, Vera. Best gossip in the county, worst view of the flag." I did not sit down yet, because there was one thing I had to see, and I am not going to pretend I didn't look for it. The head table ran along the front wall under the bunting, 8 place settings, and I walked past it slowly on the way to the sweet tea, and I read the cards. 7 names I knew. Goodman Charlie Dorn, who was at Da Nang, the Hutchins brothers, the retired chief who fixes the church furnace. And the 8th card said Vera Stanic. My name, typed, in the font, on the stalk. I found out later there was no mystery to it and no kindness either. The banquet list was pulled from the County Veterans Registry, a database, and I had entered that registry 2 years ago when the school district verified my certification, and the mail merge did what mail merges do. It printed the truth. A computer in the county annex was, at that moment, the only entity in this entire town, besides Pearl Odom, that knew what I was. I looked at my name on that table for about 4 seconds. Then I went and got 2 sweet teas and sat down at the widow's table, because whatever was about to happen, I intended to be sitting next to the only person in the room I had told. You know what happened next. Now let me give you what the freeze frame left out. Galen came down the head table at 6:10 straightening forks, clipboard against her hip, in navy with a flag brooch, and she was beautiful at it, moving like a woman checking a line of aircraft she personally owned. She reached the 8th setting and stopped. I watched her read my card twice. I watched her look up and scan the room, and find me, at the widow's table, next to Pearl, in my good gray blazer, and I watched the arithmetic happen on her face, and I want to be fair to that arithmetic, because I have run worse math with better information. She saw a registry error. She saw the nice lady from the school, the one with the muscle, the one from hospitality, filed by some computer into the one place in this town she guarded like a grave. And she came over, and she did the 2 fingers, and she smoothed the cloth, and she leaned down with the kindest face you have ever seen on a closing door. And she said it. "This table is for our veterans." Here is the part the freeze frame really left out. I started to answer. I did. 11 months of policy. And it broke. Right there. 1 second too late to matter. And I got out 2 words. "I'm actually." And Gayleen, already turning, already 3 tables into her next task, said over her shoulder, warm as a casserole. "And the hospitality table could use your muscle after dessert. On the men make a mess of the coffee urn." And she was gone. Down the room, straightening forks, having solved me. The whole exchange took 11 seconds. Nobody else heard it. That is the special cruelty of small kindnesses done wrong. They are quiet. They leave no witnesses. They file themselves under help. I sat back down at the widow's table holding a sweet tea I did not remember picking up. And Pearl Odom, beside me, had gone very still. I did the thing I do when a situation exceeds my orders. I read the room like an engine. 60 seconds. Cylinder by cylinder. The head table. 7 men settling into their chairs. 1 empty place with no card. Firing fine. The kitchen crew on time. The band kids in the corner, tuning. 200 folding chairs of my town. Folks I liked. Folks who waved at my truck. All of them running smooth and warm on the fuel of a story that had no part number for me in it. And I sat there doing the diagnostic I had refused to do for 2 years. And the reading came back clean and terrible. Nothing in this room is broken. I thought. Every part is doing exactly what it was installed to do. The machine runs perfect. The machine was simply built without me in it. And I helped build it. 1 uncorrected honey at a time. You cannot grade people on a test you never handed out. I told you I would have to say it again. I said it to myself right there, over a plate I never touched, at the widow's table, at 6:12 in the evening. And for the first time in my adult life, I could not tell whether the person I was maddest at was in that room or in my chair. Beside me, Pearl set down her fork. She had not eaten either. She was looking at the head table, at the 8th place, where the cloth lay smooth as fresh snow with no card on it, and her face was something I had never seen on it in 8 months of Thursdays, and I have been trying to name it ever since. It was not anger. It was older than anger. It was a woman checking a weather report she had flown in before. She reached over, and she put her hand on my wrist, the way she did on the fender when she wanted my full attention on a part, and she said, quietly in the voice with flight in it, "Hand me my cane, Vera." A fellowship hall does not go quiet all at once. I know because I watched it happen from the inside, and I have been replaying it for a year. It goes quiet the way an engine dies cylinder by cylinder, 1 table at a time, each one stumbling on the silence of the table beside it, until the only thing still firing is the coffee urn. Pearl Odom stood up. It took her 4 full seconds and both hands, 1 on the cane, 1 on my shoulder, and she waved off the arm I offered with a look I knew from the fender, the one that means hold the light, I will turn the wrench. And then she walked. From the widow's table by the kitchen door to the head table under the bunting is 62 feet. I know because I paced it off a month later, alone in an empty hall, trying to understand what I had watched. 62 feet, a lavender cardigan, a cane with a rubber foot, and a room that noticed her the way you notice weather. First 1 table, then 4, then the band kids, then everyone. 200 people going still in rings around a woman the size of a comma. Because there are 2 things that stop a room, a shout and its opposite, and nobody in that town had ever once seen its opposite. Gayleen met her at the end of the head table, clipboard against her hip, and her face was not unkind. It was concerned. The way you are concerned when a very old woman is loose in a seated event, and she began to say something soft, some steering sentence with on in it. And Pearl Odom reached up, took hold of the corner of my name card where it stood in the clipboard's pocket, and drew it out with 2 fingers. The same 2 fingers. The same card. She turned, and she set it back down on the 8th place setting, and she squared its corners against the fold of the cloth, and she pressed it flat once with her palm the way you seat a gasket. Then she turned around to face the room, and she came to attention. I need you to understand what attention looks like on a body that is 99 years old, because you are imagining it wrong. It is not crisp. It is a negotiation. Her spine came up in stages. Her chin found level. Her heels drew toward each other under the hem of her skirt, and her right hand rose, trembling, all the way up, and the fingers found the edge of that white eyebrow. And the elbow fought her, and lost and settled at the correct angle. The hand shook. The angle was right. And she held it, facing me, across 62 feet of Stop Town. Vera Stanic, she said, and her voice was not loud. And it did not need to be, because the room had gone to single engine and her voice was the engine. Master Gunnery Sergeant, United States Marine Corps. Get up here and take your seat. I stood. I do not remember deciding to. 22 years of conditioning stood me up, and I returned the salute, slowly, the way you return something borrowed and valuable. And the room watched two women hold a salute over the scalloped potatoes, and no one breathed. And that was the first layer. And if it had ended there, it would have been enough. It did not end there. Pearl dropped her hand, planted the cane, and turned to Galen. And what she said next, she said to Galen, but pitched to the room, in the flat, carrying voice of a woman who once talked to towers with live rounds coming up behind her. You didn't know, she said. So now you will. I am Pearl Odom. I flew for the Army in 1944. Women Air Force service pilots. I ferried B-26 bombers and I towed gunnery targets over Texas while the boys shot at the sleeve behind my tail. And some days they missed the sleeve. And I flew anyway. And 38 of us died doing it. And this country sent us home as civilians. She let that sit for exactly one breath. It took Congress until 1977 to call me a veteran. I was 53 years old. I have a gold medal from the United States Congress in the drawer of my sewing table on Cedar Street. It came in the mail, in 2010, with the seed catalogs. She lifted the cane an inch and set it down, a gavel. I have sat in that corner by your kitchen door for 15 years, Galen at the widow's table, and I never said one word, because I got out of the habit of expecting chairs somewhere around 1945. She turned her head and found me, and her voice went down into the Fender register, the one that was only ever for Thursdays. But this one asked me the right airplane. Nobody sets her at the kitchen door. Not while I am alive, and I intend to be alive a good while yet. Nobody clapped. I have to tell you that, because the version this town tells now has applause in it. A standing ovation. Someone always adds a standing ovation. There was no ovation. There was something better and quieter, and I will tell you exactly what it was, because I believe it is the most honest thing this town has ever done. In the silence after Pearl finished, Charlie Dorn, 77 years old, Da Nang stood up from his place at the head table without one word, walked to the nearest round table, and picked up a chair. And the retired chief stood and picked up another. And the two of them carried those chairs the length of that hall, past 200 silent people, and set them down at the head table, one at the 8th place, squaring it to my card, and one beside it, a 9th place that no list had ever printed. And Charlie looked at the widow's table, at Pearl, and stood behind the 9th chair with his hands on its back, holding it out the way an usher does, and said nothing at all, because there was nothing that needed saying. That was the sound the truth made in that room. Not applause. Chair legs on a wooden floor. I walked to Pearl and I offered my arm, and this time she took it, and my only line of the entire evening was 4 words, spoken to a 99-year-old woman in front of the town that had misfiled us both. Ma'am, will you sit with me? And Pearl Odom patted my arm and said, thought you'd never ask. And the two of us walked those 62 feet together at cane speed, which is the correct speed for a procession. And we sat down at the head table of the Memorial Day banquet, the trucker and the pilot, under the bunting, facing the room. And somewhere behind us, the coffee urn finished its cycle into the silence like one small polite round of applause from the only machine in the county that had known all along. Galen did not sit down. I watched her, because from the head table I now faced the room, and I will report what I saw and let it stand, because it is not my job to narrate another woman's earthquake. She stood by the kitchen door where the widow's table was, holding her clipboard against her chest with both arms, the way you hold a hymnal at the wrong funeral. After 15 years of perfect attendance, Galen Prue walked out of her own banquet, leaving her clipboard behind. It was the first time in 5,400 days that the county flags went up without her registry checking the list. She looked at the head table, at the 8th card, at the 9th chair. Then she set the clipboard down on the corner of the auxiliary table, took the stack of unused name cards out of its pocket and squared them, and set them beside it, and walked out through the kitchen, past the coffee urn, and the swinging door swung twice behind her and went still. Nobody followed her. 200 people, and not one person followed her out. And in a town this size, that is the sound of a verdict. I want to tell you what a small town does after a night like that, because it is not what the internet has taught you to expect. Nobody was run out of anything. There were no cardboard signs. What happened was quieter and, if you have lived in a town like mine, more serious. The story traveled all 200 witnesses worth of kitchens by Sunday, and the town split, softly, the way a board splits along grain you could not see until you stressed it. Some people found me at the Food King to shake my hand and hold it 1 second too long. Some people could not quite meet my eyes at the gas pumps, not from malice, from embarrassment, which wears almost the same coat. Betty at the pharmacy called me Vera for the first time in 2 years, pronounced carefully, like a word in a new language. And more than one good soul said to me, in the produce aisle, in the school lot, some version of the same sentence, while nobody meant anything by it. I know they didn't. That is the part I cannot put down. 200 people, and a parade, and a banquet, and a float called Wives and Mothers, and a note in my toolbox drawer, and every bit of it assembled by people who did not mean anything by it. A town does not need one villain when it has a habit. Malice you can confront. A habit just looks at you, hurt, and asks why you're making this so uncomfortable. And now my ledger, because I promised you I would say the sentence again and mean it at a worse time. And the worst time is here. You cannot grade people on a test you never handed out. For 2 years I stood in that town's blind spot and called the standing there humility. I filed my service where my father filed his tools. And then I flunked my neighbors, privately, one by one, for not breaking into the cabinet. Galen sorted me wrong, and the town seconded it, and that is theirs to carry. But I withheld the one sentence that would have cost me nothing and them everything they got wrong, and I told myself the withholding was peace, and it was not peace. It was a test with no paper, administered in silence, graded in resentment. Pearl waited 44 years for her country to say what she was, and she had no choice in the waiting. I waited 2 years for my town to guess, and the waiting was entirely, stupidly mine. That is the difference between us, and she knew it in the pharmacy on the first day, and she fed me Thursdays until I could see it myself. I have 2 rulings on Galen Prue, and they run like shop shifts, and I have stopped trying to fire either one. The first shift ruling is the daylight one. It says she is the only person in this county who photographs graves so that no rain can erase a man. That she does with binders what my mother did with knee supervision, and what Pearl did with a wrench chair, which is love a thing in the only dialect she knows. And that when her system finally produced the truth, a computer printed my name at her own head table, and she overrode the machine because the machine disagreed with 15 years of her grief. The second shift ruling clocks in around midnight, and it is shorter. In 15 years of guarding that table, the only people she ever carded were women. Charlie never got asked for paperwork. The Hutchins boys never had a card lifted with 2 fingers. The sorting error had a shape, and the shape was us. And good intentions do not change the shape of a thing. They only change the lighting. Both rulings are true. I run them both. The engine needs both shifts to make the parts. She came to my porch 9 days after the banquet, in the early evening, holding a casserole that had gone cold on the drive, which told me she had circled the block more than once before parking. She did not come up the steps. She stood at the bottom with the dish in both hands like an offering she no longer believed in. And she said, "I ran that table wrong for 15 years. Not I'm sorry. I have learned to hear the difference, and to respect it, Because I'm sorry asks for something back, and that sentence asked for nothing. Then she looked past me, at the porch boards, and gave me the thing she had actually driven over to give. The thing I believe she had only discovered while circling the block. Frank never sat at that head table, she said. Not once. 14 years eligible, and he sat in the body of the hall with the machinists. He said banquets were for the ones who didn't come home easy, and he came home easy, and it wasn't his chair to fill. Her hands adjusted the cold dish. So I built him one anyway. Every year. I set that table for a man who told me plain he didn't want it. And I guarded it so hard I carted a Marine and a bomber pilot at the door of a church. She looked up at me then, dry-eyed, level, a woman reading her own findings into the record. I don't know what to do with that yet, she said. I said, I do. And I told her to come inside, because the casserole needed an oven, and what I was about to ask her for needed a table, and neither of us was going to fix 15 years standing in a yard. What I asked her for, at my kitchen table, over a reheated casserole neither of us tasted, was this. Gayleen, I said, you are the best organizer this county has ever produced, and I have watched you guard one table for 15 years. I want to hand you a bigger one. I need a list nobody has ever made. Every veteran in this county. Not the parade regulars. All of them. The ones in the registry and the ones the registry never caught. The nursing homes. The farms. The women. The ones who came home easy and the ones who did not come home easy and the ones nobody ever asked. I want their names verified, and I want their names read out loud, in public, once a year, every year, until the reading is the tradition and the guessing is dead. And I watched 15 years of grief change assignments in one evening. Gayleen Prue did not apologize twice. She did something better. She went home and got her binders. They call it the roll call now, like it was always there, the way towns do. It took her 9 months. She worked the county registry against church rolls, funeral programs, the Veterans Hall ledgers from 2 towns over, pension records, and her own grave photographs. And she drove to 11 nursing homes with a notary and a card table. And what came back should unsettle you, because our county is not special. 31 names. 31 veterans living or buried inside 15 miles of that banquet hall that no list, no float, no loudspeaker had ever once said out loud. A merchant mariner. 2 Korea medics. A cook from a destroyer. 5 women. And one evening in February, Gayleen called me, and her voice had a finding in it she did not know how to file. Vera. My grandmother. My own grandmother was a cadet nurse. 1944. The government program. The hospitals. I checked the law twice. It still does not legally count as service. Congress never fixed it. She was quiet a second. She's going on my list anyway. I read her name with the rest. And that, more than the porch, more than the casserole, is the day I stopped keeping score against Gayleen Prue. Because you cannot keep score against a woman who audits her own grandmother into the record and dares the law to object. The next Memorial Day, the banquet looked the same and was not the same. The head table wore the bunting, but in front of the podium stood a second easel, plain, with 31 names and then all the others. 306 in total, alphabetical. No ranks first, no wars first, just the county in order. And at 7 o'clock, Pearl Odom, 100 years old for 11 days, stood up from the head table, where her card had been set between mine and Charlie's, and she read the first 10 names. She had asked for 10. No more. Pace yourself is a pilot's whole religion. On the table beside the list, out of the sewing table drawer on Cedar Street for the first time since it arrived with the seed catalogs, sat a small gold medal from the Congress of the United States, and Pearl never mentioned it once, which was the loudest thing in the room. She got to the 10th name and handed the list to Gayleen, and Gayleen read the 11th name, which was her grandmother's, level as a spirit bubble, and the room let her. Pearl came to that banquet in her own truck. I did not drive her. In September I had gained a colleague, Maya Reyes, 29, Army, 2 enlistments, hired into the middle school down the road, and I had watched the town begin its gentle sorting of her. The honey, the away, the muscle, and I had done for her in 1 week what nobody did for me in 2 years. I introduced her, out loud, with the word veteran in the sentence, to Betty, to the principal, to the produce aisle. And I taught her the Thursday ritual. And by spring it was Maya's toolbox in Pearl's driveway and Maya behind the wheel of the '74 Ford, with Pearl in the passenger seat supervising the shifting. And when the two of them pulled up to the church that evening and parked where everyone could see the paint, I stood at the door and watched 100 years of this country walk in on the arm of 29 more. And I thought, that is the whole repair. Right there, on the sidewalk. Not the banquet. The ride. And Gayleen met them at the door. She had the seating chart on her clipboard and did not look at it. She took Maya by the elbow, the same elbow touch from the church basement, the identical grammar of her, and she steered her toward the front, past the round tables, all the way up, and she pulled out the chair beside my bent name card, the one I keep, the one with the fold in it where 2 fingers held it a year ago, standing next to the new card the printer made, because I asked the committee to set both, and I will keep asking. And Gayleen said, to Maya in the same warm voice, with the same word at the end of it, and I promise you every syllable had been earned twice. This table is for our veterans. Right this way. The note from the windshield is still in the shallow drawer of my toolbox. I never found her. I stopped looking. Some doors stay shut, and I keep the key anyway, because a town is not a person. It cannot line up and apologize. It can only build a better habit on top of the old one and read the names out loud every May until the guessing dies. That is the work. It is slow, like brakes, like timing, like anything else you want to trust with your life. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this one. It took a torn quiet and a 99-year-old wingman to teach me that being seen is not a favor somebody grants you. It is a table with your name on it, and somebody has to set it. And if you have ever waited for your town, your family, your church, or your country to guess who you are, hear me. Stop grading tests you never handed out. Say the sentence. And then set the next chair for the woman behind you. So let me ask you what that banquet asked my town. Who around you is invisible right now, just because their service, their work, their story does not match the picture in your head? And what test are you quietly failing people on? One they were never given the chance to take. Tell me in the comments. I read everyone, on Thursdays mostly, out in a driveway, holding the light while somebody better turns the wrench. If this story held you, the like button tells me so, and subscribing means the next one finds you. New stories premiere every week. Take care of yourself, and go ask somebody the right airplane. I will see you in the next one.